Hi everybody, and thanks for watching. Today we're going to explore the possibility of recovering a vehicle if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have any trees to tie to, whether it be an open field or you find yourself out west in the sand dunes. And the ones we're going to test today are Tractor Supply ground anchors. They're 40 inches in length with a 4-inch auger on the end of it. We tried to buy the 48-inch version with a 6-inch diameter auger, but they're out of stock, and they're out of stock around all the neighboring cities, and they don't know when they'll get more in, so we're a little bit limited here on just these ones. But I will say that playing around with these a little bit, they're about all we can do to put them in this type of ground. And we're looking at a class 4 soil here, maybe somewhere between a class 3 and class 4, so mostly sand, a little bit of rocks. Hopefully they won't cause issues today, because if you get into rocky soil, these are probably not the best ground anchors for that. You probably want to look more at a Vortex style or possibly a screw type ground anchor. And so here's the next available size. This is actually a 36-inch with a 2-inch auger on it, so you can find a little bit smaller ones. Obviously a little bit easier to install, not going to hold as much. But if we test these and you get an idea, I'd say you could pretty much scale either up or down the ground anchor of your choice and get an idea of what it can take to pull that out, or what kind of pulling force you can expect to get if you're trying to recover a vehicle. And in order to make these the most effective, if you're going to be pulling out a vehicle or recovering, you're going to be pulling more along horizontally. The anchors are actually mostly designed, I would think, for the vertical pull position, but there shouldn't be any reason with pulling them more horizontal with the ground. Of course, you're not going to have the depth you're going to have if you drive them in vertically. And you might ask, well, why don't we just drive these vertically in and then use that? But as you can imagine, when you're pulling horizontally, you're going to end up bending or possibly bending the eye. And when you do that, you're not going to be able to recover the hooks or the ground anchors themselves. Therefore, if you put it in on an angle closer to that of the ground, you'll be less likely to actually put a bend in it, so you'll be able to recover it easier. And I would recommend putting these in about no more than about a 45 degree relative to the ground, so anywhere from about a 30 to 45 degrees. Again, the closer you go to the ground, the less depth you're going to get. You won't bend it, but you're not going to have the pull capability, so you have to balance those two, and somewhere probably between a 30 and a 45 degree angle is probably your optimum, I would say. Let's go ahead and put these in. I'm going to cheat a little bit and use these are designed to be put in by hand with a bar, and although that can be done, I wouldn't recommend it. It's difficult enough with power tools, and if you're putting them in by hand, it really makes it tough, and sometimes you can't even get them to go with power tools. But in this case, we're going to be using a DeWalt stud and joist drill. It's a variable speed, high torque drill, and we don't have power here, so we're bringing our own power in the form of an inverter and running it off the tractor battery to provide the 120 volts for this. And then we have our ground adapter tool that allows us to hook it to a driver, and I'll put a link in the description below if you're interested in buying one of these, which I would highly recommend, just to give you the ability to hook onto this and be able to drive these larger anchors a little bit easier. If you find yourself not having those things as an option, you could, or at least the drill, you're going to need the adapter one way or another, or some form of that. You could use a battery powered driver, but in the case of these bigger, what I consider bigger anchors in the 40-inch range with a 4-inch or larger auger, you're just going to need a lot of batteries, or at least a lot of really good batteries in good shape, because it just takes a lot of energy to drive those into the ground, especially if you got tougher soils. Keep that in mind as you're building up this capability, that how you're going to power these things. You also want to have a chain with a hook off one end so that you can get it through the eye of the anchor. You're not going to be able to fit the hook through there, so you need a loose end of the chain without a hook, and then you can gang these together. Again, we're going to try 2 today. We'll see what the pull-out force is, but you can just scale it up all you want. Put in 8 of them, you'll have 4 times the strength, and of course 1 would just be half of the 2 we're testing today. And I'll give you an idea in this type of soil what you can expect to have for a holding force. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start driving this anchor in, these 2, and get them hooked up, and hook up our crane scale to our winch. We're using a trailer with a winch on the back, hooked to a tree, just to give us a good anchor point there, just to see how much it's going to take to pull that out. We got a 5,000 kilogram or 10,000 equivalent pound force crane scale, which we shouldn't be getting anywhere near with these. And of course our tools and our tractor with a relatively smaller battery, smaller than you're going to have in your Jeep or other vehicle. And there's I'm using a 2000 watt Bestech inverter. It's not a pure sine inverter, a modified wave, but it gives you supposedly 2000 watts, and it seems to live up to that from a little bit I've used it so far. But that's a good power source for this, and we'll go ahead and get started and drive these in. And again, it's important to drive these as close to the ground as you can, or as far into the ground as you can, because every inch or 2 is going to give you that much more pulling force. You may even want to consider modifying these. You could actually cut and weld in extensions if you want to get them to go deeper. But again, depending on what your ground conditions are, you might find that you really can't get that deep. But when you're going in on these shallow angles, you're really not going to be able to get that deep anyway. And having a longer anchor could be beneficial depending on whether you want to have more anchors or just longer and fewer of them. And you want to make sure this is tight. If it loosens on you, you'll get some wobble that you don't want. So you want to tighten that as good as you can. And then also put these in as close as you can to each other. And I see I grabbed the wrong anchor. This is actually the 36 inch with a 2 inch flute, or 3 inch I guess it is. I said 2 inch earlier, it's actually a 3 inch flute it looks like, or auger, whatever you want to call it. So we'll get the right one put in there. And I haven't found another tool like this. This is only available on eBay that I found so far. There's some similar ones on Amazon, but they don't have the ability to clamp onto the ground anchor, which makes for a joint. So you can't really put a lot of force into it, a lot of force into the ground anchor to get it to go. All right, didn't hit any rocks, so these took a good set. It should give us a good example of how well we can pull with these 40-inch ground anchors. Now you want to wrap your chain around there through both eyes. That'll give you a good spot to anchor your winch or whatever you got to pull out with. In this case, we'll be using our crane scale hook. We'll be hooking that up and we'll be starting a pull test shortly, and we'll see what we can get up to. Just to show you guys what we got going on the winch end here, we have a winch that I put a diesel engine on. I got another video of that if you search the rest of my videos. But this has the advantage of you can run it with a 7/8 socket and battery powered drill, or in corded drill if you wanted to, I guess. And that's mainly because this is non-reversible. Obviously the engine runs in one direction, although there's some possibility it could run in reverse. That's another topic. You'll need to manually reverse it through this shaft if you have to take the load off before you can actually disengage it. And for this experiment, all we're doing is just pulling it in with the battery powered drill and not using the diesel engine, just because we really don't need to pull it in quite that fast. We're just watching how much force it actually takes before pull out. I know it's really hard to see with the sun is shining on. It's a LED. We're not going to get a good view here, plus the camera scan or refresh rate is pretty close to the same as what the crane scale is, so I'll read it to you as it goes up. But we're just starting to put load on it now. We're coming up to 100 pounds and really just starting to get a set in on the ground anchors. Up to 400 pounds now, starting to approach 500. $800, 1,000 pounds. I suspect our winch's wire rope is settling in on the drum a little bit and popping in between the wraps. Back up to 1,000. 13, 1400, 1500, 16. $1,800, 2,000. Looks like she's going to stop about 2,000. We're starting to get some slip now, starting to go down. So we're looking at around 2,000 pounds. And we're getting pull out now. And that's what you can expect from two 40-inch, 4-inch augers, Tractor Supply ground anchors. Certainly you can scale that up. If you want to put 8 in, you can look at having about 4 times that much. So about 1,000 pounds per ground anchor. So if you want 8,000 pounds, you'll need about 8 ground anchor set. So that's about it. I appreciate you guys taking a look at this. Hopefully it'll give you some ideas, some options too. If you're looking for those, find yourself stuck in a place where you don't have any trees to tie to. I'm guessing with 4 or 5 of these, giving you about 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, that should be able to get you out of quite a bit of stuff, especially if you're using the vehicle as well to help assist that. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you again on the next video.